Welcome to the next episode of the AV Experience. I'm your host, Ryan from Ascend Audio Video, and Ben forgot about us for a while. He had better things to do, pirate ships to sail on, and he is back. Finally. We were both on vacation. I was supposed to be in the Bahamas, then a dog ate a sock, and that didn't happen. So family went to Bahamas. They had fun. I mean, I enjoyed being by myself, but it was, I'd rather be in the Bahamas. Ben got to go on a pirate ship.
A replica of a
laughing at the
pirate
sock.
ship.
You what?
I'm not even sure if the British public agree it's a pirate ship. I mean, he was knighted. The Queen was perfectly happy with all the treasure he was plundering. But let's be honest, he was a pirate.
So you're saying it was actually part of the Royal Navy and that was just normal Royal Navy stuff?
Before the Royal Navy existed, so he would have been a privateer.
Oh, I
so it was
see how you're trying to walk that line and push that away. Like, oh, no, we're not pirates.
Oh, no, he was a pirate. Let's be fair.
Okay.
He was a state-funded pirate.
State-funded pirate. Okay.
The Spanish definitely agree he is a pirate.
Well, let's jump right into this. This one is going to be a room by a gentleman that lives here in Kansas City, Kevin. It is Ascendo LG97. There's some cool stuff. It's kind of a unique room because it's in an adjacent room to a kitchen. But let's talk about the story. I'm going to show you what the room looks like. Yeah, let's just jump into that. So here we go. This is what the room looks like. I'm just kidding. It doesn't look like that. It looks like this. So there's a lot going on in this room, right? Lots of stuff in a very small space. But let's get through the story. Dad finished working on a basement himself where we built home theaters. This was in 1995. That's where that all started. And it started with this 52-inch Hitachi. And it used a AIWA system in a box with Pro Logic receiver, VHS, good old VHS, and a 10-inch sub. 2006, that was changed. Still using the 52-inch Hitachi. Went to a Yamaha. I think it's this stack at that point in 2006 with some Polk R50s. Do I have that picture? I don't think that picture exists unless it's this picture.
No, they're Iowas.
No, they're both Iowas. Okay, so we don't. Oh, yeah, it's this picture. You can see the Polks there. CS1, Iowa rears, Iowa sub. 2013, old rear projection TV converted had issues. They switched to an LCD, which I think is this. I think that's what they switched to. And that was in 2013. And then in 2014, he moved into an apartment with his wife and they went to a Samsung 60. This is not in said apartment. This is in their house, but I think it's this TV, that Samsung 60 Plasma. Still using the Polk speakers, the Iowa sub. So not much has changed there. 2015, nothing really changed. 2017, they changed to a Roku. 2019, they same sub went to nothing changed in 2019. They did do a ultra short throw in the bedroom, which is this. So this is what it looks like now. Started here. This is where it is now, which I actually think is quite I don't mind that concept of an ultra short throw in the bedroom.
Can I be contrarian? TVs in the bedroom? Come on.
We're Americans, man. Come on. You got
bedrooms are for sleeping.
There's screens everywhere. My wife, when I first met her, she had to have the TV on to go to sleep. It drove me nuts.
I'm perfectly happy falling asleep on the sofa to the TV, but come on.
Yeah,
TVs in bedrooms, guys.
It's very normal in the US.
I've put loads there. When I did full home integration, I put loads there. Hey, I've got a cinema to put in a bedroom in not that far future. It's just not for me.
Not for you? Yeah, I'd rather not have a TV in a living space, in a living room, personally. But my wife wants that. I'd rather have it in like a different, like the main living room as you enter the house. I don't want a TV there. But my wife is going to win that war anyway. Took down the home theater for the first time ever. So in 2020, they actually took it down. And then in 21, they went back. So this is what it looked like in 21. Polk reserves. So R700, L400, R200, R900. And then 22 was very similar. And then the big change happened in, which is where we're going to talk here. This is where we're going to live. So this is Ascendo The12s, Ascendo The10s on the ceiling, RTJ 18 subs, Marantz AV 10, Marantz AMP 10, Nvidia Shield, GIK acoustics for all of the panels, thick rug, and a NAS.
I
So
mean, you say big change. Let's be honest. In these 31 years,
it hasn't
there
changed
have been
much.
there have been something like this is an incredible history of 31 years from like how many people in the 90s had a 52-inch screen? Well, that's a decent size. Maybe they were more
Mhm.
common in the US, but rear projection screens in the UK were not common. They weren't a thing.
No.
I mean, my uncle had a 50-inch, it may have been 52, it was 50-ish rear projection that, I spellbound every time I saw it in the 90s. Just, you
Yeah.
know, nobody had those over here.
I mean, a
So,
TV like this in the that's a big TV in the 90s.
yeah,
That is an enormous if you saw that in somebody's basement in the 90s, you were like, "Oh my god."
right?
That's like being at a commercial cinema with something that large. We had a I think we had something very similar to this in the late 90s, not this early, in the later 90s, um, earlier 2000s. We had something 52-inch. What was that thing? I wanna say it was a Hitachi or a
Yeah.
Mitsubishi. I think it
Right
was a
there,
Mitsubishi.
that's for glory days. You know that this system was every weekend. VHX from Blockbuster, 52-inch.
Mhm.
This was the place to hang out for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately,
So
during my time growing up, I had no idea how any of it worked. So I was always if it didn't work, I was pushing buttons, probably making it worse. But it was great when it worked. We had, um what speakers did we have? We had Bose, the Acoustimass with the angled little box speakers, which for a kid,
yeah,
I
I
thought they
know.
were amazing. I mean, I couldn't complain about them at all. So, not the greatest now, but, then there weren't as many choices as there are now.
No. So I
You didn't
love
have
this
as many
journey.
options.
We'll focus more on the most recent changes in the current setup. I love this journey. I love that this shows it shows a love for hanging out with people, building
Mhm,
systems that are there to be used. Like none of these rooms have been made to be technically perfect, to be the prettiest systems possibly in the world, like, but they've been made to be used, to be enjoyed, to spend
mhm.
time with friends and family watching movies, and that follows through all of these rooms, like all these changes we've seen in this 30-year window. Every one of them's just there to be used. So,
Mhm.
I love this story of moving from a rear projection and some Iowa hi-fi right through to, let's be honest, it's no small investment where we're at now. It's
No.
big screen full Ascendo. It's not, sorry, it's not full Ascendo because it's not Ascendo subs. I mean, it's Ascendos for all the main speakers.
Mhm.
But hey, like, this is no small investment we've got right here in a
Mm-mm.
a space that we'd agree is not ideal, but
Most spaces are not ideal. I mean, we hyper focus on things, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, Ben and I we're we've talked about this before. We're pretty jaded as far as what we've experienced and what we think needs to potentially mainly just because of what we do for a living. I mean, we're constantly trying to push the envelope of what is possible living on the edge. But that gets to a point where you're seeing through rose-colored glasses, right? Where everything looks nice. That's what the expectation is. And every day, this is a very I won't say it's every day because this is not an everyday equipment list, but it's much more of an and this Kevin, I'm not putting you down at all. This is more of an everyday location for a theater of where it would be, a media space, a use, that kind of thing. So I love this. I love this because the majority of people in the world, we're spoiled as Americans. Which land is cheap here. It's typically have bonus rooms, you have more space. Um, People typically have to make do with the space that they have. And this, I think, is a great example of that, and it's very near field, which I don't think is necessarily bad, as long as it's configured as such. And we'll talk about some of the nitty gritties, what we think is going on. Um, but I actually really like this. I
Yeah.
like that it's different. I like that it's not a dedicated theater. Um, it's a departure from what we normally talk about. I like it. I, yeah. Any before we dive into this, any first impressions?
No, I mean, there's beyond. You've read a lot of the equipment. When we get down to the information that we were given, um, for positives and negatives,
Hmm.
um, the very first point, negatives. It's part of a house and falls under wife approval factor. Let's just be clear. If anyone's partner has approved this, then this
You're
partner is a
already winning in
right.
life.
This partner is a keeper. If I
Hmm.
try doing this with like, there's no way in my living room, in an open plan living room, my wife met me and I already had a big system. Like my wife and I were at university together, and I had a big system when we met, right? Relative to what I have now. But so she knew what she was signing up for. But let's be honest, she would not let me do that in an open plan space.
Yeah.
So, if this falls under wife approval, then this is a great partner. So that's
So
straight
before
up.
we dive into this, this is what Kevin thinks the positives and negatives of his system are. It's part of the house and falls under the wife approval factor. I think you're already winning there, as Ben said. I mean, this being right off the kitchen, great. Right next to the kitchen with all wood floors. Yes, I could see that as a negative. I mean, it's asymmetrical. Room echoes are real, even with treatment. Understand that. Speakers are very close. Side speakers too close if you sit on the couch sides. I can sometimes hear the fridge and dishwasher, so the noise floor is not great. TV is a bit too high. I can't lower it because the center channel will be too low when I recline. I think I might have a solution for that. Ascendo speakers really benefit from wall boundaries, but half my room doesn't. So the asymmetricalness of having some with a bound reinforcement and others being open air is problematic. Uh, no easy way to add acoustic treatment because the room is asymmetrical. Positives: the shake on the floor, because this is a suspended floor. This is a second story. He loves that. It's a floating floor. TV virtual visual quality is incredible. I mean, he's sitting 6 feet from a 96-inch OLED, so probably awesome. Couch
Correct.
is super comfy. I love that you're making decisions on what you find comfortable instead of what you think should be there. Love the couch. Great family space where my wife can watch the kids who use the theater more than I do. I like that it's a family space, that your family actually utilizes it. Dedicated gaming PC, so he uses this a lot for gaming. Wife never complains from watching anime and rarely complains from watching movies. Worst offenders are ones with a lot of constant bass, submarines, and loud gunshots. I think he's talking about the Mission Impossible where the sub was
Yeah,
rolling. I
sure.
think that's what
That's
he's talking
deep.
about. All right. So, first impressions out of the way. Kevin's thoughts, negatives and positives out of the way. Let's dive into this. So, where do you want to start here? I think I've got my notes on where we typically start. We haven't done this in a while, so I'm
But
kind of all
yeah,
over the place.
so let's look at the seating position very first, I think, because in
W
this room that's
Yeah,
really
room
key.
layout is first. Let's talk about the room layout. So talk about the seating position. What are your thoughts there? And
Can
I'm
we
gonna
get
switch
that?
over to
Can we
I'm
get a
bringing it up.
photo? There we go. So, right, first things, in terms of immersion, this sofa is bang in the middle of this room. I say bang in the middle. I don't know that it's on a halfway point, but it's in the room and
You're
it's
gonna be
surrounded.
close.
Yeah, it's in the room and it's surrounded. So in a lot of these rooms, we see there are challenges because to make the partner approval work, the
Mhm.
sofa is hard up against the back wall. And in a normal living space, I totally
Pretty
understand why that
typical.
happens.
Mhm.
That's for most people, space is a luxury, and having that space in front of you to walk in front of the sofa and to walk around the room. From an AV perspective, if I'm doing a dedicated room, why would I waste all that space? Why would I put the
Mhm.
sofa at the back and just have free space doing nothing, getting the best audio? Here, we're in the middle, right? So we are surrounded. So I love the envelopment that's been achieved here. We're not worrying about how do we lay out overheads with a sofa that doesn't work with 4 or 2 or 6
You know
overhead
what this
positions.
makes me think of? It makes me feel like a mixing studio.
Right?
Like, you're
This is
just surrounded by everything. Take the Dolby graphic and just sit yourself in the middle of it, and
yeah.
that's what this makes me feel like, which I
I
like.
mean,
I think
the
it's awesome.
last the last Dolby Atmos enabled studio I worked in is probably a pretty similar size. If this
Mhm.
was enclosed, so if that was walled off, um, maybe a little wider and a little shorter. The last one I worked in, it was probably a bit narrower and a bit longer, but this isn't it's not a dissimilar size and shape
No,
to
and
post-production
if you
systems
put a
I've been
wall
in.
there, this wouldn't be a I mean, you'd have to make sure it wasn't a square, but
Sure.
as long as you work around the limitations, which being near field and that effectively being set up for one person, I don't hate it.
So that also completely like this seating system completely changes the relationship to the video. So
Mhm.
that wall isn't any bigger, right? You've got a window one side that you could cover, sure, but you can't. You're at the end of a wall. Nobody's going to be hanging a TV 2, 3 feet overhanging that wall, right? There is a limit to what is going to get partner approval. So that realistically is the biggest screen you're going to get there. So we're
Well,
just
not
shy of
only
100
that,
inches.
but I don't know that that left channel would fit if the TV was moved over there.
Absolutely. So okay, you could go to a big projection screen, right? It
Mhm.
means that you've now got to make the room dark. There's a lot of windows. There's going to be light coming in from the kitchen. And in this room, a direct view display is the correct choice all day long
Yes.
because of the fact of what it's being talked about. It's being used for anime. It's being used for 4:3 content where OLED black levels are going to just mask that down beautifully.
Mhm.
People are going to be wanting to use the kitchen while others are watching programs. That is going to be daytime viewing. So this is a direct view decision all day long, right? So that we can just not worry about projection here, right? It's just not the right choice. So the screen is as big as it's going to get. We're at just shy of 100 inches. So here's the challenge of that, right? I like to be pushing up high 50s, low 60-degree horizontal viewing angle. Well, how close have you got to sit to a 100-inch OLED to get that?
It's probably right about there.
6 feet away. Um, if he is exactly 6 feet away, I make get about 61-degree angle to that screen.
Yeah.
Um,
So
this is
people think this is egregious. It's really not.
right.
I mean, this is where I'm actually above this. So I like this. Now, my only part that I don't it's not that I don't like. It's just a caveat that I want to make sure that people understand. And we've talked about this before when we've talked about screen sizes. Your brain is not fooled when you sit closer to a small display. Your brain knows how big that display is. And
Yes.
this is why when you go into an IMAX theater and the screen is actually enormous, you get a huge sense of scale. If I sit right in front of this screen, my brain's going to go, yeah, I still know how big this is. I'm just sitting closer to it. So it is
Uh,
not, in my opinion, a replacement for a larger display, like
yeah.
sitting further back from a bigger display. But to get the viewing angle, I think this is appropriate. And I think Kevin did it right,
Yeah.
where he has made the decision to sit in the middle of the room. He has made the decision to sit close to the display. And he's kind of made this room about the experience of one person, understanding that the other people that are around it are going to suffer with speakers being too close and things like that. That he's just made it about that one seat. And I think this is a great theater for that one seat. It's a mixing studio. I'm going to keep calling it that. It is a mixing studio.
Yeah. I mean, it's a mixing studio that does seat. I think that's a 3-seat sofa. He acknowledged
Yeah.
himself in the negatives that if you are sat on the side seats, you're very close to the side surrounds,
Mhm.
and that is physics. There's nothing that you can do if you're trying to get this level of immersion in a room this size that will ever make those side surrounds get magically further away. And the physics of the inverse square law, as we approach closer and closer to a speaker, the impact it has goes up exponentially. So absolutely, it's a physical constraint. Now, I don't know if he is, but there are things you can do about this. You know, I've talked a lot before about a project I have with 3 seats that we have presets to make it better for 2 people. So although you can't fix the left-right speaker problem for 3, if someone sits in the center and someone sits to one side, you could definitely make a weighted preset that just lowers the level to the side they've sat, raise it up a little bit on the other side, and you're making an offset presentation of surround to give a slight, like that could be at the slight detriment to middle, but to a much bigger improvement in experience for the person.
You're making it a 2-seat theater instead of a 3 and kind of putting the middle seat in between those 2. You're
Yeah,
making it a lesser of 2 evils.
absolutely.
Yeah, I got you.
And just to make it so that, you know, my real concern with rooms where those side surrounds get really close is that the person who has this real passion, the hobbyist, takes that middle seat, which means they put partner or child or guest to the side where the performance is compromised by that locality. So anything you can do to make this experience beneficial to the other person you're enjoying it with means they're going to spend more time enjoying it with you.
Yeah. I think share the love. If you're the enthusiast, you get to do this is just a word of advice. And I'm not saying Kevin doesn't do this. I'm sure he does. If you're the enthusiast, let the people have the special seat. Let them have the hot seat. You sit somewhere else. You get to experience it all the time. I get just as, if not more, enjoyment watching somebody else enjoy the space.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Because if they're enjoying it, that makes me feel like, you know what? I did a pretty good job. And that's what it's all about. Seeing that smile come on, that kind of thing. I love that. One thing that I think you can do to kind of mitigate that hot spotting and kind of increase the envelopment and surround feeling, make sure you don't have a super narrow dispersion speaker if you're going to be sitting right next to it. Spreading that energy out and allowing the utilization of reflections can help in making it feel like you're not just getting shot in the side of the face with energy coming from that speaker. You're still going to have issues with it not being even from seating position, but it can help pretty dramatically in the experience level in that theater from you being able to localize and feel like you're being hot spotted in the actual use. These speakers are probably right on the fringes of that. Would you agree? They're not a huge dispersion speaker, these coaxials from Ascendo, but they're not the narrowest either. Do you want to jump into, we've kind of already gone through room layout, design, video. We'll talk about acoustics later. Do you want to talk about measurements and how these speakers are, what they're actually doing?
Yeah, we can jump to that. You know, it's interesting to consider the speaker journey as well, right? So it's easy when just looking at this current position to see a lot of speakers and a lot of subs in a, from the angle this photo's taken, you know, it's not a big space, or it's, you know, it's not, it's being unfair. It's not a small space, but it's not a big grand space. Okay. So
this is a better idea of how big the space is because there's less equipment in it.
And I think this is interesting because for many people with these speakers, now I don't know the Polk range too much. Remind me which ones we're looking at. Are these this is the first range of Polk he had. Then he bought.
I believe these are the first range. Yes. Okay. So these are the S series, the signatures.
So you know we've got an obvious problem here that with this big reclining sofa that was in the space before, those rears are not sticking their head over, right? So you're reclined right into tweeters. You're wearing those surround backs as headphones.
They are headphones.
Yeah. But for many people, you would look at this and think that's plenty of speaker for that size room. There's one sub in that far corner. You've got a decent pair of floor standing towers. You've got speakers right behind. You know, the bookshelves to surrounds are not small. you'll
I think I
get
know
the
where you're going with
asymmetry
this.
that he's aware of. It's rear ported, so one side that is ported to a wall, the other side it's open. That's going to give some imbalance, but that would have been a rational, normal stopping place for many families. You know, when you enjoy this, but you're not a dedicated
Mhm.
enthusiast that wants to really
Well,
push
the
it.
the rational stopping place if you're doing surround would be to not have the rears in this image.
Sure.
You would not use the rears in this. My argument for this is it may seem cluttered. This is better. Not just performance-wise, but when you get closer to a speaker, like you're talking about a near field experience, you need more to get that surround. The sound doesn't have time to spread out, so your ability to locate and localize is more pinpointed. And as you get closer and closer and closer, I would put up the argument more is better. The more you can put in that bubble going around, I think the better that experience is going to be because you can actually move objects and it's not localizing as much to that one channel. I
Yeah,
think
I
that's
would
where you were
definitely
going.
still rather take this as a 7.1 than a 5. You know,
Yes.
that's the question that's been asked. You know, could you do it as a 5 and almost bridge that gap between where you've got the current surrounds now and rears? I prefer it this way. I think
Mhm.
it does increase the compromise when you're certainly if you're watching things that are mixed as 5.1. If I was watching an actual older 5.1 mix, I'd probably upscale it to try and pull some of it onto the round backs. But realistically, like this is an Atmos layout. It's being used with more modern content. I would guess a lot of the time, if you were really focused on older content and not upmixing it, you probably don't need the 6 overheads. So
Yeah.
I would guess older content is being upmixed, or it's there's a lot of Atmos content. I like it. So then we've moved from what were fairly big towers into
Mhm.
bigger towers. I don't know if you have that photo, right? So we've gone bigger. Now up firing Atmos channels.
It
Um,
is a flat ceiling, so if you're going to use a bouncy, I'll call him Jonathan coined this name, a bouncy house speaker.
yeah,
It's ideal, but just think about this way. For these rear Atmos speakers, if you take the angle of where that speaker is and it's firing, it's gonna come up here, it's gonna bounce off the ceiling, and then it's gonna come down in front of the listening position. So your rear
sure.
is actually gonna sound like it's in front for that bounce effect. These are probably pretty properly placed, if I'm looking at it correctly. They're pretty
Yeah,
close.
it'll be
They may be
interesting.
slight
It'd be interesting psychoacoustically to almost turn those rear ones round and let them hit the back wall.
and then the ceiling.
Yeah, and just well, you know how it'd be interesting just to play with them and see if you could get them to locate in some way.
Well, I
But
mean, the other thing you can do is a lot of these speakers, they just sit on top. Put a little shim here,
yeah,
right? Shim this so that it's not as much of an angle and play with this angle. Break out the protractor, baby. Use a laser, fire it, and if you got a flat ceiling, see where that reflection lies. It doesn't have to be complicated. If you can hide that, you could hide that using some fabric, or maybe it even doesn't look bad when you're shim it a little bit. Um, you can make huge strides for very cheap, if not free.
right.
Do not
And
think that you buying equipment is always a solution for fixing issues like this.
sure. And so it's interesting to consider this point of a journey where we're at now cost wise. So from the prior Polks to here, he
Mhm.
says was a $7,000 upgrade. So we're still not in huge sums of money here. This is
Well,
becoming
sums of I wanna make sure that is subjective, right?
sure,
Everybody has an idea of what value is. To some, that is a huge amount of money. Ben, I think you
100%.
and I are a little a little jaded
No,
on
I
the
get it, right?
systems that
That's
we work on, but
that's gonna
yeah.
buy you a small used car, right? That's
But in comparison to where it went,
yeah,
it is not a large sum. I'll put it that way.
exactly that. And that's why I love this journey because you know, we're now looking at bigger subwoofers. We've got bigger speakers. We've added some Atmos, right? This is still now, right, at every level of what is reasonable and rational to do in this space. We're there. Most people are going to stop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even for a lot of enthusiasts in this space, this would feel like the destination, but not for Kevin.
Not for Kevin.
And we do get a note, and I'm going to have to read this note because I'm not sure you want to. Let's be fair, right? So he says between 2022 and 2023, I met Ryan for the second time, and then he spends an outrageous sum of money on a load of amazing speakers. So it's all your fault, Ryan. I've decided.
I get blamed a lot. It's okay. But at least I'm doing the drugs along with you guys. I'm not sitting here and being like, I'm selling. Man, I am just as addicted to this stuff. Ben is just as addicted to this stuff. Peter is just as addicted to this stuff. Jonathan's just as addicted to this stuff as all of you are. We're doing the lines off the back of the toilet seat along with you. All right.
So true. We are equally guilty of spending our own funds on these things.
Before we move on to something else, Willie actually asks it's not Willie, it's Ember DH asks a question. And this comes up because I think of the Atmos speakers that are sitting here. Describe the difference in immersion between height channels and top channels. And I think there's a lot of confusion in what those actually are, because a height and a top technically are actually different in how they're portrayed in mixes. You want to take that one, Ben?
Yeah. So the first thing there is going to be a question about what the receiver actually supports. So in many cases, with consumer level receivers, they are one and the same thing. So irrelevant of where you've put them, a normal regular consumer processor doesn't have any way of knowing where that location is. Once we get to a Trinov, which has a 3-dimensional microphone, it really does know the height it's positioned, it knows the angle it's at, it knows the azimuth. So a Trinov really does know in 3D space where your speaker is and can route the content that should be in that space to that space. It can do some clever stuff if you need to use it to remap sounds, but if you can't put the speakers in the right places or the ideal places, it can then remap those sounds using what's available. That's
to a point. It's not magic,
sure,
but
that's not going to happen with a consumer processor. It doesn't actually know where they are. So in this case, and in many cases, it will know if you're using an up-firing product or an actual down-firing product, a ceiling-mounted product. But it doesn't know whether you've got those in the right place. It doesn't know whether you've put them on the wall or on the ceiling. So it doesn't actually make that much difference in this case. As we go up to bigger speaker counts, there would be a difference of, so like many of our rooms, here at Foundry behind me, we have the 6 that you would see in many cases, the 916. We then add 2 more above the screen, so they're directly above the left and right, that become heights rather than tops. In the right room, they have an effect. In a room like this, obviously, there's no way. 6 on the ceiling in this case is plenty. You do not
put
need
it this
to
way.
move
You
into
need
8
ceiling
10.
height in order to make heights work. Height channel brings height to the soundstage. So you've got your main array, your main LCRs. The heights are going to bring elevation to the front and rear walls. And there's more heights that those are the typical ones that are used. Tops are overheads, typically. They're over top of you. So when you talk about a height and a top, really what most people are akin to with Atmos speakers is tops.
Correct.
Is typically what they think of. Heights, unless you're in rooms that have the ceiling height, are entirely unnecessary. They, depending on the speaker, if you have a super narrow dispersion speaker, they can be beneficial, especially if they're lower. on a normal, I'll call a normal ceiling height speaker, but you need ceiling height in order to get the channel separation to make that spend worthwhile. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to really tell with or without. So it becomes a waste of money. Bigger rooms, the bigger the room, the more impact that's
Right.
going to make.
So I generally now prefer the distinction of listener level speakers and overhead speakers, and don't split out heights versus tops, because it changes on the content that you're using, the upmixer, the
Sure.
codec it used. There is a difference between what Oro, DTS, and Dolby, which channels they use, where they put sounds. So
Mhm.
I think of a distinction of listener level and overhead. I would suggest for most people, the simplest way to plan this is to follow Dolby route down. So the Dolby 246, rather than looking at specialized Oro or DTS
Yes.
layouts, stick to the Atmos ones. More content you're going to watch is going to be in Atmos than the other two formats.
Oro, especially not, because there's very little content. And DTS can work pretty well with Atmos layouts.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is, even though these speakers, as they're placed now, are on the front walls, front and back wall, but if are
Mhm.
separate, the if we worked out the angle of where they're at,
These would be tops.
if you mapped those to be in ceiling speakers, they they triangulate out to roughly the same place as if they were up on that ceiling. This just gives them more space and flexibility. You wouldn't want to put a in ceiling speaker right on that room boundary, because the interaction with the wall would not be as
I mean,
ideal.
really, you wanna
So,
try and avoid using in-ceiling speakers as much as possible for your top and height channels.
sure.
I
But
like
that would be
using the
a
nomenclature top and height because it gives people an idea of where that speaker is actually located, not necessarily how it's going to interact with the decoder.
yeah. So in this case, they are wall mounted, not ceiling mounted, but because of the angle of them, we have to remember these are wedge speakers by Ascendo. It's not that clear to see. You can slightly in the middle ones, but this speaker has a 30-degree angle to its baffle.
Mhm.
So those middle pair that look like they have some angle on them, actually it's a lot more angle than it looks, because
Can
the
you bring
baffle
do you
has.
have those up? Are you able to bring those up?
Yeah, if you share my screen, I will quickly jump to them, because actually I turns out I didn't have them. Speakers.
Failure.
I had the
Failure.
I had the other ones up, the 12s. So these are 10 passive wedges. So
Same print. Yeah, these are 10s. There
these are the
is
right
a
ones now.
12 Pro in this line. There's not a normal 12.
No.
So, if I remember correctly, Kevin originally wanted to do 12s everywhere, but Ascendo does not make a 12 wedge 30. They make a 12 Pro wedge 30, but that's another level above
Yeah,
the
a significant level up. But so
base layer
what
speakers that he
is
has.
the things that you can notice here is specifically this bracket. This bracket is
Kevin's not
designed.
using that bracket, but just
Okay,
keep that in
but
mind.
as part of the design of the speaker,
Yes.
this is designed to give you loads of flexibility about placement, how far it sits from a ceiling, the angle it sits, the rotation. So you've got the speaker is designed to be flexible. When you're looking for the same box volume, because box volume is important, right? If we just made this speaker a lot smaller, it will behave differently.
Yes.
So the rear of this speaker is giving us the box volume. It's not as much as if it was square, but it's decent, right? It's a decent size speaker. By having this 30-degree angle, you're not taking a big rectangular box and now having to angle the whole thing 30 degrees, which would make these much more bulky on the walls. If you look at Kevin's 12s he has got, if we jump back to the view of the room quickly, Ryan, if you imagine taking the 12s, these big rectangles, relatively big to the 10s, they're still not huge speakers, but they're relatively big. If we wanted to get this same amount of angle in the middle, that speaker would be a lot bigger in place, because of not having angled baffle, we'd need
And
to
it's gonna jut off the wall quite a bit more. I mean, if you
right.
compare it to the top speakers here, think about having a 12 normal passive, it would extend all the way down to here to get more or less the same angle. So you're losing a lot more headroom. This design compromise, or it's not, I mean, it kind of is, change allows for you to get the angles you want without the loss of space,
Yeah,
providing a lot more flexibility.
yeah. So I'm a big fan. I use wedge speakers now. Like in most Ascendo rooms we do. Oh, hold on, didn't mean to. No. In most Ascendo rooms we do, we are using wedges for at least some of the speakers. And
Yeah.
there's places where they work really well. If you're trying to get some front wides in, I'm very outspoken about front wides facing each other is the worst thing in the world. Like, don't use them. If you can't angle them to some extent, just don't use them. Front
The
wides
only
facing
speaker
each
that
other is
should ever
terrible.
face each other is probably your side surrounds.
Sure. And even then I prefer not exactly 90 degrees. I'd prefer
I
to be a
prefer
few
them
degrees
slightly
off.
ahead.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
generally go a few degrees behind, but I try not to be exactly on 90, a couple of degrees out. But that's sort of irrelevant. The front wides facing each other is terrible. But if you put one of these on a wall, so you could put it flat back to the wall now,
Mhm.
you've got a 30-degree angle. It's going to put the good sound right in your region, even if it's not perfect. Like, it's not a problem if 30 degrees isn't perfect. You might really want 35, 40.
Mhm.
You can't believe how much better 30 is than none. Just so that's not the case here, because what he's done separately when he moved from the Polks, these 12s are now wider. So they're quite wide. That's a 60-degree viewing angle. So we're at 70, 80-degree
Mhm.
listening. For music, there could be some compromise to stereo imaging. You are starting to get very wide. It is possible that stereo imaging could break
Especially
down if
with
this isn't
this
tuned really well.
boundary
Yeah,
versus this boundary, it's gonna get kinda weird. But I don't think Kevin listens to a lot of two-channel. I think it's either multi-channel,
I think
music,
so.
or movies, which I
Yeah,
think is fine.
and from a sense of immersion, they're not a million miles away from where front wides might live. If you had a bigger projection screen, front wides wouldn't be a huge amount further into the room. So they are doing a great job of bridging the gap from the center channel to that first round.
Mhm.
They're giving you this beautiful space that sounds can pan and move around you. As long as it's all well calibrated, I'm not
Do you
concerned
think
that
he
they're that
has
wide.
another option in this? I mean, he could turn them vertical and get them closer to the TV, but then you have a potential boundary interaction here. Granted, he has boundary interactions everywhere, that are different. Would you do it differently in this space?
No, I prefer this to. I might have them vertical and slightly closer in. I don't know. I'd need to look at measurements, but what I wouldn't try and do is get them under the TV next to the center. If you had
No.
all three of them side by side, you'd completely destroy the separation. I much prefer them outside the telly than all
Mhm.
three under it. I think on a really big screen, all three over it, under it, we're seeing more people doing different designs to get around big direct view screens. But at this size, that's not the answer.
So, Kevin had mentioned that he wanted to lower the TV. I think this is a good time to talk about this. He wanted to lower the TV. Can you think of a way to be able to do that? My thought is lower the center channel and then put another center above it. And the benefit there is you're actually anchoring your image into the middle. Not ideal, but it does
Not for
allow you to
me.
potentially lower it.
Yeah, that's not for me. Um, so I mean, we're at that point where I'm going to start spending more of Kevin's money, but we're at that point. Let's quickly go back to the speakers that Ascendo make. Where would I find it?
Are you talking
Okay.
about the director?
No, not the director. New of Matt. The new pro. Here we go. Well, there's a 6-inch version of that as well, isn't there? Here we go, Pro 8. Right. Potentially changing that center channel from the 12 to the LED wedge, so it's a smaller
Yeah.
speaker, but it is going to reduce the height that you get the telly down. It's got some angle to it. It is wedged. You might get the speaker lower. I probably would do this a different way, but this is an option. Okay, this is an option with the 12-degree incline and dual 8s instead of the 12. Right, you're going to buy some room. It's not how I would actually do it. Like that, if I was building it from scratch, I'd be using that, not the 12. It didn't exist.
This
when
speaker
he
didn't
bought the 12.
exist when we did this
Absolutely.
room.
So it didn't exist when he bought the 12. If I was doing it now and going all Ascendo, I'd use that as a center, not the 12, to get the TV lower. But honestly, I would just be looking at the recline level of that chair. So it is still a reclining chair, isn't it?
Mhm.
As you lean back more, that changes your relationship, your eye level to the screen. I think with the kit that's there, it's just a matter of changing your position to
Yeah.
make that viewing angle comfortable. Not you. I wouldn't in this room put the center channel above the screen. I personally don't like over under at all. Just don't like it. In this room, actually, it may work because you only have a fairly small listening window. It's a
Yes.
single row.
To make sure people understand, the reason that's important is because of the vertical relationship between an over under center. If you start changing things in depth, it gets out of whack very, very quickly because your convergence for how the sound waves are going to converge on a certain location, it only really works at one distance. And when you start moving away from that, it creates problems. So
Yeah,
one row, it can work decently well. Yes, you do introduce some comb filtering. Will it be a problem? I've never thought it was an actual problem
I
listening
mean,
wise.
when correctly time aligned to a single location, the comb filtering's not a concern. You know,
Mm-mm.
it's no different than a phantom center that can work really well. For
Yeah.
one seat, phantom center can work really well. And it would be interesting in this room to find out if Kevin's ever
That
tried
is another option.
phantom center. I think it would be detrimental across his 3 seats, but for the single middle seat, it might work really well.
And for
It may be a challenge because of how wide left and right are.
Phantom
Um,
center, what we are talking about, let me pull this up again, is you would eliminate the center channel. You'd probably bring these up a little bit, maybe rotate them vertically, and then you wouldn't have a center channel. So these speakers would combine playing the frequencies here to create the center image. So it would actually anchor to the center of the TV if you moved these up. The problem then, instead of things not time aligning vertically, is they don't time align horizontally. And that's why the center is so important for multi-seat, is because it's a single emanating point, and so you don't have to deal with
yeah.
delay and alignment issues left and right. Whereas if you do a phantom center and you start deviating off the center, it becomes a problem because your distances are different and it doesn't work ideally. You can do it, it just is a compromise.
Yeah, it's the same as listening to a 2-channel music presentation that has a really big, wide stereo image to it with the vocal pinned bang in the middle. Like when that
Mhm.
vocal is straight down the middle and you've got a huge amounts of space around it, from the middle seat, that behaves exactly as intended. As you
Yeah.
start to move left and right, that image begins to collapse slightly. It can work though for music because you don't have an image to tie things to. So as
Mhm.
you move off to the left, the vocal will come with you, and it means that you do get less scale on the left and more on the right. But that's not a huge problem when there's no picture because you're not looking at a person singing thinking that's weird, the voice isn't coming from where they are on screen. That's why it's different for film and why that center channel is so important is you are looking at the dialogue on screen. You need to tie the image to it. You know, the ventriloquist effect is great, but it's only so good, and the less we can make our mind try and process things, the more natural it all becomes. So the closer the voice comes from where you're looking at the voice appearing from, just the more natural it feels. So Phantom can work really well. I avoid it beyond one seat. So I
You
wouldn't do it
should.
here. I wouldn't do it here. I like what he's done. I'd solve these problems. I don't know what the center is sat on, whether it's sat on an amplifier and kit. You might be able to get that speaker a bit lower, but I would just be adjusting the angle of the backrest.
Yeah. Any other talking points on the speakers?
Definitely on the subs.
Well, we'll get but do you want to talk about measurements or anything on the speakers? We good?
Yeah, well, let's bring up, if you should bring my screen up. So this is the Pro 12. Again, this is a really important thing to understand, that that speaker, if you look at it in isolation, doesn't look like it's the best performing speaker in the world. There is some deviation to it. We understand how to use a coaxial speaker and the things you can do in EQ, the things you can't do in EQ, the way the room interacts with a speaker. So nothing I see there concerns me at all, because I know how I'm going to deal with it.
That wiggle up there is actually normal for any coaxial speaker, is an interaction between the tweeter and the woofer acting as a waveguide. So do not think that that is endemic of this specific speaker. This is totally normal for a coaxial, and you can actually get rid of this by changing the toe angle.
So the key thing is, hey, this is at 1 meter, a 2.83 volt input signal. We are riding way up in the 90s for this SPL. Touching up towards 100, where the port tuning frequency is going to be. This isn't a speaker that's designed to play really low. So we have to remember that just because it's a 12-inch woofer, loads of people have got subwoofers that are 12s or smaller, and they're digging down, 30, 40 hertz. That's not what this is designed for. It's designed for effortless, high SPL without big distortion. So just because it's a 12 doesn't mean it's designed to play super low. This isn't a problem. We're not looking at this in any way concerned, because it does what it does for a reason, on purpose. It's been designed to suit its role. The dispersion on this speaker is well behaved, as we'd expect from a coaxial speaker. Where is the... Okay. So the key thing is that our listening window is smoother than the actual on axis. So that's fine. We know what the overall average of what is being delivered to the listening window is a nicer response. But where there are some undulations, they track perfectly. So all of these undulations that track where the early reflections and the sound power follow the same shape as the direct sound means we can EQ this in the room. So once we've got the contribution of the speaker with the reflections in the room, any EQ we apply in this region, from kind of 1,000 to 3,000 or 4,000, any of the EQ that's done here is going to improve that sound for everyone. It's not a concern that we are fixing something in one seat that has a negative effect in another. And if these lines were deviating in different directions and not tracking, that could easily be the case. So this big on-axis dip, you see, it doesn't exist in the listening window. It doesn't exist in sound power or early reflections. It just isn't a concern, right? That's just a quirk of coaxials, not a concern at all. So the interesting thing is how much power we've got for this room. Where is the given sensitivity figure for these? 1 second. Have I gone the wrong way? What page?
It's like 97.
Efficiency is rated at 99 dB at 1 watt. That's in half space, in 2 pi, which is how they were measured. If you see the measurement report, you'll see they were measured in a baffle wall. There will be some loss when you're not in a perfect baffle at the lower end, but it's not hugely significant in a room like this because you're still pretty close to those baffles. So there will be some effects with the speaker boundary interference, a little bit of comb filtering depending on the distance. So there is some interaction. The SPL will be slightly down, but not any concerns. You know, this is a speaker that in half space is quoted at 133 dB peak at 1 meter. Okay, if we just think about this anechoically, by 2 meters, we're dropping 6 dB. So that still gives us peaks of 127. He's only sitting about 2 meters, right, from these speakers.
Mm-hmm.
So the headroom here is endless. And I think that's a big point that's interesting. That's the speaker's headroom is endless as long as we consider enough power to drive them. But what this does mean is that at his actual listening levels, he's probably never using more than a few watts of power to these speakers. So not only is the speaker mechanically endless in the power that it can handle, he's giving his amplifiers a seriously easy ride because they're just not having to do much to get to the levels he'll be listening at. You know, power handling 600 watts. He's probably routinely using 6. So these like the capability is there, and that's a wonderful thing. I love headroom. You know, we talk too much about cars, but you and I both appreciate sports cars with way more power than we need because it's fun. Love it. So I said when he made that Polk upgrade that it was a logical stopping place for most people. And that I stand by that. That room does not need these 12 in them, right? You've got headroom that you're not going to be using, or like you're not pushing these things to their limits. But the fact you've got it is what's going to make this room special. It's headroom is such a wonderful thing that if you've got the option to have a bit more headroom than you need, you know, I envy you.
I would actually argue that I think those Polks, depending on the volume level that you're trying to chase, and us Kansas City guys listen quite loudly, I don't think they have the headroom even to do something in this space without encountering distortion.
No, well, let's just be honest here, right? So the signature S60s he had before.
Can you zoom in on that, Ben?
I will try. View, zoom in. Okay, so this is the Sound & Vision's test bench from the S60. Center channel sensitivity done at 88.5 dB.
Isn't awful.
10 dB less than what we've
It is, but looking at all speakers, that's pretty normal.
Sure. It's a massive difference in the power that you need to deliver these things. I don't know what that Polk can actually take, what its handling is.
It's rough. You would need roughly 4 times the power to equate what
and it won't be able to take that power. That's the problem. So do we get just a regular on here what the power handling is? Is there a full set of specs on page 3?
And while Ben is looking for this, I want to make sure that it's clear that what we're talking about and the reason this is important is based on our experience with how I know Kevin listens, how a lot of people in Kansas City listen, how Ben listens, and that we're not saying that that low sensitivity is bad as long as you work with the speaker within its capability, and that is your expectation. But if you start pushing to needs and wants outside of what that tool can deliver, which the speaker is a tool, you might break it, or you're going to end up having a bad time using that speaker or tool.
So they don't actually give the power handling in that review, but I'll find it.
It's a soft dome tweeter. It's going to be quite low.
Yeah, you say that, but I mean, PMC make a soft dome tweeter that will take your head off it in level. It's incredibly loud, so it's physically possible.
But that PMC
it's now archived, so I can't even find it. But essentially, for every dB that you're listening, it needs more power. Mike's just said the reserve series he was using will do 115 dB in that space, but they require 250 watts to do it. I would. Oh, that was the reserve. That's the next model after he went from a Signature 60. The key thing is, just because they can doesn't mean they'll sound nice doing it.
Yeah.
And it's entirely possible that you can get a speaker that has passed the tests to deliver high SPL, but they don't sound pleasant doing it.
I
Whereas,
wouldn't wanna push even what we've been talking about with the Ascendos or Perlissons or any of those high output speakers. I wouldn't wanna push them to those limits either. I want them to be on cruise control
yeah,
when they're not pushing to the boundary of what is possible. So, when you're making a decision, when you're buying a tool to accomplish a job, because that's what these speakers are, they're tools to accomplish a task, you don't wanna be right at the ragged edge of what that tool is capable of. This should be if you're building anything out of wood, you don't wanna be having your tools right at the limit. That's not what you want. It's not safe, it's not gonna be pleasant, it's not nice to use. Same thing here. Just because it can do it at 115, that is typically the measured edge of what is possible. And I try and stay away from that. I want my equipment to be cruising along, not trying, having a big block Chevy just loafing along on
yeah.
the highway, not a care in the world.
So yeah, when we move up to the Reserve R700s, the upgrade he made, sensitivities was measured just shy of 89 dB at 1 meter. So the interesting thing of what this does to power, we can look at measurements of power amplifiers. We have some measurements here. I haven't reviewed these to see what we actually see, but do we see? Yeah, okay. So
That's actually the monolith is a good amp.
yeah, let me see if I can open this up and bring that in slightly bigger. So if we look at our distortion, it gets to just over 200 watts, and then the distortion ramps up just exponentially. You know, we go from still here at like 0.005% distortion, suddenly with not asking much more of it, it just ramps up. You know, we're at 1%, you know, orders of magnitude higher, just increasing. So my preference is to always stay 3 dB below what an amplifier is, what the spec sheet says it can do, because this has been measured and it's great. If they are, I'm going to presume they class this as 200 watts per channel, do they?
They do.
Okay, so they're saying 200 watts per channel, and what we see is it delivered it. It delivers it before it goes crazy. I have seen amplifiers on test benches that make claims of, and this is particularly true of AVRs. Once you start pushing AVRs in multi-channel, what we really need it to do can just be in this position where the distortion it's gone wild. You know, if this amplifier is rated at 200, I'd like to be using it at 100. We know that even when we push it a bit hard and we get some big transients, if we've designed to only need half of what it's capable of, 3 dB down, distortion is going to be under control. So you've got two choices. If you need those extra 3 dB, well, you need to buy a 400 watt amp instead of a 200, and then you need speakers that can take the 200 and have 200 reserve in the amp. Or the easiest thing is we just find speakers that are more sensitive. If we get 3 dB more sensitive speakers, and they can still take, you know, this 100 watts here, this 200 watt amp is having an easy ride, and we're getting the same output as if we were pushing it to its limit on a less sensitive speaker.
Something that's not considered a lot here too is this is Gene taking these measurements, right? And they're probably in an open area, good airflow when these measurements are taken. If you shove these into a cabinet, these measurements can go right out the window because you're imparting more heat, and heat can and does drastically change the behavior of this and when things come in. I'm not saying it's going to, but it is definitely something to consider. So don't just think, oh, I'm going to shove this amp into a cabinet and all is going to be great. If you don't keep heat under control, and heat is the enemy of electronics, you're potentially gonna have a bad time.
Yes, you are. So, just while we're talking about this, because I've got this open, I know this is not what you would use this amplifier for. Um, a lot of
Oops.
people have a view on amplifiers that they'll just deliver what they deliver everywhere. You know,
Mhm.
Ryan and I are both big fans of deep infrasonic output, and there is a reason you use amplifiers built for that purpose. You know, this is its 1 watt performance, and you will see it starts to roll off at 10,000 hertz. By 20,000 hertz, we are down less than half a dB, right? Quarter of a dB.
Your ability to hear that is gonna be near
Well,
impossible at that
we're going to
range.
want a natural roll off in the room anyway. So
But I'm
it's
going
like,
after I'm countering people that are gonna say, "Oh, well, you can't hear that." Man, the number of people that none of my friends can hear above 17,000 hertz. It's not
sure.
happening. Kids can, but are you gonna hear a half dB difference?
It's just as part of an EQ where you're rolling it off, it's just irrelevant. At this other end, it's not, right? So by 10 hertz, this thing's only down
It's
1
not
dB.
irrelevant if you were using a speaker that plays down that low
If
or is
if
sub.
you decided you were going to use this to drive an infrasonic sub,
Yes.
by 10 hertz, it's down 1 dB. But look at the shape, right? This hasn't been extended, but you can guarantee that's now going to fall off a cliff.
Is that like a
That's
40
just going
dB,
to
48
drop like a
dB per
stone.
octave?
Um,
Close.
yeah, we're seeing a 1 dB drop here over about 4 hertz there. I'd need to see it slightly extended to see exactly where it's going, but it's about to start rolling off rapidly.
Yeah.
By 6 hertz, it's going to be doing nothing. It's just going to have gone. So you wouldn't be using this to drive an infrasonic sub. I just wanted, because I had it, I just wanted to explain why when we do
Speakers,
drive
this
these
is gonna do
gigs.
great.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Great
Look
amp.
how perfectly flat and linear through the whole range you're going to drive it. It's perfect for what it does.
ATI makes or did, I don't know if they still do, made this amplifier, the modules that are inside it, they made fantastic
Oh, is it ATI
amplifiers.
built?
It is ATI.
Okay, well, you can. To me, that explains why it does what it says it
What
will
it
do, right?
does? Yeah. It's built like a tank. Those things
Yeah,
weigh a lot. It's a good amp. It was a good choice.
yes. ATI have manufactured for many companies, I believe. I don't have a list, but it's certainly a few. And
Just a few.
generally, they're all very well built and can be
I
trusted to
can't
do what
think
they
of a
say.
poorly made ATI amplifier.
No. So using this to drive the Ascendos, it's we're just going to keep it in such a low distortion range that it's going to be effortless. There's so much power. It's right. You know, I am more than happy with this amp. And there are definitely amplifier snobs who want to just spend loads of money on amps. If you're
Now,
driving a speaker that is as sensitive as the Ascendos and you're keeping this miles away from the point where it starts to ramp up in issues, I would suspect that if you spent 10 times the money and you didn't sit and do a dedicated proper blind AB, right? If you just listened to it one day and you came back the next day and the amp had been replaced with something that cost 10 times as much, bet you wouldn't notice
I don't
on those
even know that.
speakers. I just
Yeah.
don't. It wouldn't make a difference. You don't, because you're using them in such a easy, gentle way. There's nothing going to strain them. They're not going to overheat. They're not going to be pushing
Do
distortion.
you do you have any issues with the Marantz AMP 10?
Um, I don't know. I've never used one.
Gene really liked it. I think it's less power, more
Which way
channels,
did
but
he go? Did he move to a Marantz?
I think he's using both
Okay.
because the Marantz. No, maybe he's just using the Marantz.
Okay. I'd misunderstood. Right. Okay. Again, it's perfectly fine from 10 hertz up to 20K. Going to have no issues at all on what we're driving here. Where is it? That's Okay, so it definitely its distortion now starts to climb rapidly from 100 watts.
Mhm.
That's with 2 channels driven. Um, with 7 channels driven,
It's a
that
little
starts
earlier.
to kick in a bit earlier.
Which I don't think is a problem with the Ascendos because of the sensitivity and your
Yeah,
proximity to
you're
them.
gonna be in this
You
range.
don't need that power in such a small space, in such close proximity. So the trade-off here
There's a
that Kevin,
question
I
mark
think,
about why channel 4 had a spike.
I think Gene asked that I think he asked that question. I don't remember. I'd have to reread the review. But your trade-off is more power per channel versus driving significantly more channels. You're spreading the power out over more channels because he's using one amplifier, which I think is driving all of his speakers in this room
Yeah,
instead of the mono price, which was only doing 7. So for one
yeah.
box, this is a great amplifier putting out that much power per channel.
Yeah, and the great thing being that it it's not sagging. Like, the power
No.
supply on this thing is great. So what they haven't done is put in an underrated power supply and make big claims. Oh, it can do 300 watts, one channel driven, right?
Mhm.
This delivers what they are claiming. It delivers when you're running all channels driven. Like, these lines are all very tight. It's pushing that same power into 7 channels the same as it
Mhm.
does into 2.
And you
Um,
can't ask much more of this because you're limited by wall power off a 15 amp circuit. It is limited by what it can draw, and that's why they're not asking more of it. If you wanted more, you're probably gonna have to run more than one power supply, and you're gonna have to change the internals and how everything's behaving, routing, and, so we're limited by the wall, and they've pushed that, I think, to the limit. I like the AMP10. I think it's a great piece of kit.
mhm.
Anything on the AV10?
Um, I have no it's perfectly suitable for this task. I have
Yeah,
no concerns about that being used. Um, I think it's a good choice.
I think so too. Now, especially now that you can do direct out, bass control, normal direct. I think we should touch on this for a moment though, Ben, and that is that not all Dirac pieces of kit are the same. And this is important to note. Just because you get Dirac does not mean that it's the same as what's on another piece of kit that has Dirac. It's close. It's the same principle, but the internal structure, the number of taps, the implementation, all of that can differ. I'm not saying it's bad or better. I just want to make sure that people understand, do not buy based on the assumption that Dirac is Dirac. It is at a fundamental level, but how Dirac does the implementation is they effectively, it's like building a kit car. They give you the stuff, you got to put it together.
Right.
And how much you're supporting it, how it was actually implemented can vary from box to box.
And I think then there is a discussion of your individual implementation of that same. You know,
Yes.
you could take the same AVR and put it in 10 people's rooms with 10 different speakers and 10 different acoustic challenges to fix,
Mhm.
and you'll get a better or worse result.
You could put it in the same room, and this is true for Odyssey. I'm going to talk about Odyssey for a second. The same room, measure 10 different times and get 10 different results. And I don't think this is untrue for really any auto EQ system. There is some sense of, I'm going to call it randomness. It's not, but um, things just being different. The other thing to take into consideration is not all microphones are the same. This is something that Jonathan has talked about a lot, in that there is a plus or minus, I think it was 3 dB on the microphones that came with the Odyssey, which meant if you were on the extremes, you could have a 6 dB difference from
Yep.
microphone to microphone. That is enormous. And that is why really nice measurement microphones get so expensive, because that deviation effectively vanishes
Yeah.
and you are measuring consistently what's going on in the room. And if you're putting mics in arrays, they're all consistent from mic to mic. So just little
So then
caveats there.
that usage though, so here's my last point on this and the usage of this. So I have not always loved the end results from direct art. And I've heard it many
Yeah,
times and thought it sounded terrible. I'll be honest. I've heard it in a few different rooms and really not liked what it does. And it
but
depends
I've
how you
heard it
use
and it
it.
sounded
Sure.
hmm,
Now, here's the thing. It depends how you use it and what you're trying to make it do. So
mhm.
whenever I've heard it in a two-channel system, so you're listening to two-channel content, right? So you're playing stereo, but you've got all the other speakers to support stereo. It can be, absolutely
It can be
incredible.
transformative.
Absolutely. Can be incredible. Where I think it struggles is if you use your main listener level speakers and your overheads, so not the subs, you start using your main speakers to support each other.
Mhm.
I've seen people tick a box to start using mains to support subs. I
Yeah.
mean, I want to poke these people in the eye while they're driving this thing, but you know, these are people who should know better sometimes that work for people involved in writing it. But the challenge becomes when you run out of this headroom. As
Yes,
soon
that's
as
where I was
you
hoping you were going.
are asking a main speaker to start supporting other main speakers, or heaven forbid, just don't ever do it, asking mains to support subs, you need enough capability in that speaker and amplifier to play all the content
Yep.
that it needs to play at that time and
S
anything it's being asked to do in support.
so that's like asking these speakers to support as opposed
Right,
to asking these speakers to
right.
support.
When we
These
talk about
speakers,
headroom,
headroom. And this
if
is
you're
where
yeah,
Ben is going with this, is people don't think about this. If a speaker is playing content and supporting, it's summing. Like, all of that is on top of each other. It's doing all of that at the same time. So you're asking more of it. You can rapidly run out of headroom,
yeah,
run out of amp, run out of all kinds of different things that you aren't necessarily thinking about. So I think what you're getting at is it's not necessarily Dirac's fault, though I would like them to put an addendum in that says, hey, this is something you need to think about, but it's something you need to think of for the total system to
right.
make sure that everything can work together to deliver the end result. And this is why you're
Yeah,
saying,
even your regular EQ, like how many AVRs by default, if you don't stop it in the auto EQ process, will allow boosts up to 6 dB? That's
most.
not uncommon,
Yeah.
right? On many speakers, you've designed it with no headroom. Like you are trying to run everything you've got, all the amp power, all the power handling of the speakers to get to the listening level you want. If you just suddenly add 6 dB of EQ at any given frequency, you haven't got it. It's
And
not
you see
there, right?
this a
And
lot on the
suddenly now you're
forums
into clipping,
and
you're
in
into huge problems.
you see
In
this a
this
lot on
room,
forums and Facebook and all these other places. Oh, well, the speaker says it'll play to this level, and that's the level I'm going to play at. And they're not thinking about even the
yep,
speaker by itself and how much distortion it's going to start imparting as
yeah,
you infringe on those limits, the limits of the amplifier, what EQ is doing on top of that. It would potentially be fine if all you were doing was cutting, but if you're also boosting,
yep,
which doing a limited amount of in EQ is typically okay as long as you're not getting egregious with it. If you're not thinking about, again, the sum of the parts for the system, and you're instead thinking of everything on its own in a vacuum, you're leaving a lot of performance on the table, if not going backwards. So just little, that's actually not a little caveat. Those are some big things that I would
yeah,
encourage a lot of you to put into practice is think about all of these, what you would traditionally think is little things, and realize that when you start putting them together, they start summing and they impact each other a lot more than people may think
yeah.
at
I'd
at the
love to hear
start.
this room. I'd love to hear this room using art and not using art and really get a sense of, with the headroom we've got, how effortless it is, how
I
much
think
that
art would do it
gives
really
us
well in this room.
to EQ this to get the frequency response where we want.
Mhm,
Like you've got
mhm.
enough firepower with art here to potentially fix a load of problems. And I think it'd be really fun to hear. It's a cool
All
room.
right, last part of this topic, acoustics. He's got art. That's a huge part of this, right? being able to manage the asymmetry of this room, close proximities, because I would think there's gonna be some standing wave issues potentially in this space. Being able to neutralize this thing. All of his speakers and subs have well, you wanted to talk about the subs before we move on to
Yeah,
acoustics,
I'd
and I don't
say
think we're gonna
it's
spend a
a
lot of
lot of
time on
sub, right?
acoustics.
It's all 4 corners. If this was a sealed square room, ideally not square, but if it's a sealed box,
Which it would be nearly square if we put a wall right here.
yeah, we're able to mitigate some of the issues. The issue of being on the center line of a room, vertically, like front to back and left to right. If you're in that dead center, you've got a first reflection concern. Sorry, not first reflection, a first room mode reflect problem in 2 directions. Dead center of that room is a problem, but 4 subs can help mitigate that by using the corners. That can work. Here we've got that layout, but in an asymmetrical room. So it will be interesting to see how they're summing and what they're doing modally to give you some of this fix, because that layout is a proven, like the academic research for Harman research, Todd Welty's work proves that this is a great option, 4 corners.
Yep.
That work doesn't extend to how well this would work in an open plan, open concept room. So it'll be really interesting. But do we have enough output? Right? There's 4 decent subs. If you go back to some of these previous iterations of this room, we were hugely undersubbed.
So this is 2 PC2000s.
Here we're doing okay. Before this, right? Oh, that's the bedroom. So
Yeah.
okay, maybe it wasn't so bad.
It's
Oh yeah,
one.
here, right? This is vastly undersubbed.
But a lot of people are gonna think that this is okay. And to a lot of people that equate subs with just shake, that's probably gonna be an okay impression. But for what I think the majority of you guys watching and listening are gonna think, not nearly enough.
Yeah, that's a long way off. Not just
Woefully
because there's only
underpowered.
one woofer, because it's an output issue, but also there's no ability for modal control. So if that position is not working with the room modes, front to back, left to right, up and down, if that's not working, then you've got no option of using multiple subs to deal with those modes. Like 2 subs gives you a lot of benefit. 4 subs is an ideal place to be.
And then up from there. So Ember DEH asks, is towing a detriment to corner loading?
At these wavelengths, it's barely seeing that toe at all.
Maybe at the top end of the range, you may be able to measure something, but I don't think it's worth worrying about.
No, I mean, what it's doing is it's giving you an equal amount of reinforcement, both sides of it.
Both sides, yes.
It's at these wavelengths, it wouldn't. I would be surprised to see if there's much measurable difference if you turn them all flat to their back. If you tow them in, they'd need to be retime aligned, because as soon as you're moving them, that changes things. But in terms of actual output, it's really minimal, because these wavelengths are so long. It's really minimal.
Acoustics. Anything else you'd like to see done in this room?
Yeah, the rug is obviously doing a lot of lifting. The 4 big traps of 5 across the back are going to be taking up some of this excess energy that's around. Is there even more than that? Is there one below it? What, 7, 6 on the back?
I only see the 6.
The interesting thing would just be to maybe some scattering on the ceiling to just help floor ceiling.
Yeah.
You need to fix anything modal electroacoustically here. So Art's going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting. There's not space to get big bass traps in corners. So you're going to be using Art to do electroacoustical optimization with these 4 subs and the output you've got. I think that's a smart way of going, not trying to cram in all these corners. Like, you can't
Yeah.
anyway because of the windows and open plan.
I
So just some scattering on the ceiling would probably be
I think I'd
beneficial.
like to see some scatter plates on the rear acoustic panels, and then I'd like to see some scattering on the ceiling.
Yeah.
I like an immersive bubble. If that's not you, fine, absorption's gonna be your friend, but I like being surrounded. So I want the waves to scatter. I'm also a proponent of, as we talked about with these speakers and their measurements, if, your listening windows are all very similar, if not the same, less absorbing and more scattering on first reflection points, because I want those reflections. I
Yeah.
want those in my space. I've come to realize
And
I
they
like being surrounded.
they may have them. These are manufactured by GIC Acoustics,
Oh,
who
yeah, you're right.
have a
They may
scatter
be
plate.
underneath them. That
So
is very
they
true.
may be under
Yes,
that wrap. That is an
that is
option with
true.
GIC. It's like an extra $10 um, to have the scatter plate added at manufacturer. So they may
Yeah,
be there. If they weren't specified, I would have done. I think almost every single order I place with GIC,
has them.
just about every single product has their scatter
Yeah.
plate on the front of it. I
Do not
almost never order anything without scatter
do
plates.
not overlook diffusion, my friends. Scattering is, especially if you have a well-behaved speaker, oh, man, the immersion that it gives you, especially to things like two-channel, especially two-channel, is amazing. I think you can get away with more absorption in a multi-channel environment than I think you would agree, because you have more speakers. But for things like two-channel, which I do a lot of, it is transformative having that in your space. Um, Anything else about acoustics? Don't
Nope,
think
I'm
so.
covered on that.
All right. Overall impressions, and then we'll wrap this up.
I mean, the overriding impression is that the wife approval factor is
Shocking.
a lot better than I would get in my home.
Yes.
But it just wouldn't fly in my home. So
No.
like, of course, not everybody has room for big dedicated spaces. But what I'm seeing right here when we look at that picture is the end result of a 30-year journey, clearly a love
Oh,
for
you make it sound
entertaining.
like it's over. This is just the stopping point, I think, for
This
Kevin.
is the current position. Okay, there is every possibility there's more to come, right? But this is, if you look at where this started from a parent's basement 31 years ago, right? We're 20. I forget how many years ago. What year was it start? But irrelevant, right?
95,
This is
31
it's
years.
such a cool journey of just pushing boundaries to be able to do this in a normal, regular family home.
Mhm.
It's incredible.
Wow. I
Such an
do like
awesome,
it.
like, the experience it will deliver is great.
I think this space is awesome. We talked a lot about it. I don't have many negative things to say. Aside from its location and the asymmetry, that's gonna be the biggest thing. I mean, the room is the dominating factor, and being able to get away from those asymmetrical layouts, I think, is the biggest improvement that you can make. Kevin has talked about going to a basement, but he really likes having this in the living room for how approachable and usable the space is. That is not talked about enough. If
Right.
the space is hidden, if it's far away, if it's not aesthetically whatever your reason is, you're not going to use it as much. This space is right off the kitchen, man. I bet you they're there all the time,
Yeah.
and that's awesome. That is fantastic. That's awesome for you, Kevin. Um, Really happy for you to do that. A couple quick questions that came in. First off, is 9 feet ceiling appropriate for 6 Atmos? Would you do 6 here, or would you do 4 if you have 1 row?
Are we talking about this particular room, or is that a general question?
It's a general question.
Okay. So generally that works out 2.74 meters. I have to convert this into human, not bald eagles. Right. I've seen that work for 6 plenty of times. The ceiling height wouldn't be my main judge of whether 4 or 6 was the right choice. It would be the size of the listening area, so the length and width of the listening area.
Mhm.
For a single row of seating, I might suggest 4 is fine. But once we move into 2 rows, I'm almost always going to suggest 6.
Yeah.
So it depends on but that height, it's not an immediate red flag to me. I think you can
With a
make that
single
work with
row,
the
the
right
height is
speakers.
not an issue.
Yeah.
Couple more questions. Where did that go? Prince Dorama. With in-wall speakers, does it make a huge difference if you don't use back boxes?
So definitely check with the manufacturer.
Yes, it
So
comes down to the design.
yeah, some of them have been designed to they're designed with the concept that they know it's going to be open backed. So it's expecting it to be open backed. They're not relying on pressure from a cabinet. Others will give you great information. I think it's KEF give you a minimum and a recommended enclosure size on almost all of their in-wall and ceiling products.
Good old KEF being objective.
So if ask for manufacturer is the best thing. Even better, buy a sealed box in wall. You know, these Ascendos were measured in wall, inside a baffle. But let's say, I'm just going to use our friend Per Listen because it's one of the ones I'm most familiar with. It's a sealed product. You're not questioning how big backbox should be.
Right.
It's a sealed backbox already. It behaves the same in every wall.
You put it into a wall, your baffle is not necessarily going to be the same size. You don't know what's in there. You don't know what the insulation is. Your sound is potentially going to leak into other areas. The advantage, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You can get a lot more out of a smaller speaker because you have a huge back box area using a wall, but you lose consistency, which I think is the biggest thing. Consistency of having a sealed backer box, no leakage. But typically with a sealed system, with a sealed in-wall, a lot of times they're more expensive. So things to consider. Piggybacking off that, Mike Stevens.
More betterer.
More betterer for more money-er. How important are back boxes in the ceiling other than sound isolation in the attic? Same thing applies.
Same question.
It's no different.
So here there is one other point to make here. Depending on your local building code, if you are cutting holes in your ceiling, you need to reinstate fire rating. So
we don't have to deal with that here.
In any building?
Commercial, yes. Residential, no.
Really?
At least here in Kansas City.
Christ, you cowboys.
Sorry.
What, with your houses made of straw, you don't worry about them burning down?
I don't know. I've never thought about it.
Christ alive.
I mean, you're going to burn up. You might as well do it quickly.
Okay. I mean, in the UK, there are rules depending on the height of stories above it. There's all kinds of things. But like the obvious thing, and it's a really obvious given, if you're just DIYing this and you haven't checked with anyone, if you start cutting your ceiling and it's a double-lined drywall ceiling, builders don't generally do that for fun. They do that because they were made to. And if they were made to double-line the ceiling, it was probably for a fire rating reason.
Yep.
If you're going to do that, make sure you use fire hoods, reinstate the fire rating that you've just taken out. Even if your code doesn't make you, I still am a big believer in using fire hoods.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up there. Ben, are you joining us on Monday?
I believe so.
Okay, Ben will be back on Monday. He wasn't going to join us today. He was just going to be off gallivanting to his own thing, but he decided he was going to grace us with his beautiful face.
Yep, I came into the office about 20 minutes before this call, and I'm going home in about 90 seconds.
Just for me. Just for all of you.
I'm going to go and spend another afternoon with my kids.
Well, enjoy that. Thank you for everybody for joining us. We will be back Monday at 8 a.m. Central. Not sure what the topic is going to be. Ben and I will go over it, and then Jonathan will join us as we're starting to get in traditionally in Monday evening. But thanks again, Ben. Thanks, Kevin, for submitting this room. It was a lot of fun going through it. If you guys want to see your room reviewed in Rooms for Review, fill out the Google form down in the description. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers, all.
Enjoy your home theater journeys. See you guys in the next one. Later.